I need to tell you something that still makes my exoskeleton crawl 3 cycles later. My name is Vektar, and I teach advanced metallurgy at the Galactic Combat Academy on Terminus Station. Been doing it for 47 standard years. Seen thousands of cadets pass through my forge, every species you can imagine. Thought I'd seen everything. Then the humans showed up. Now, before you think this is another one of those, oh the scary humans tales, let me stop you right there. This isn't about them being terrifying warriors, or whatever nonsense the gossip networks are spreading these days. This is about something far more disturbing. This is about watching a species think in ways that make absolutely no sense, and then watching those insane thoughts somehow work anyway. Her name was Maya Kowalski. Short thing, maybe 5.5 feet tall, with dark hair pulled back in what humans call a ponytail, and these unsettling green eyes that seem to catalogue everything around her. She walked into my class on the first day looking completely out of place among the Corthians, with their 4 arms, and the massive grillnecks cadets who could bend steel bars with their bare hands. The first assignment in my class is always the same. Simple, traditional. I've been giving it since before half these species joined the Galactic Coalition. Forge a blade, I announced, gesturing to the materials vault. You have access to titanium alloys, carbon composites, thermal-resistant polymers, and ceramics. You have 5 days. The blade will be tested for edge retention, flexibility, and combat durability. Begin. The other students rushed to the vault immediately. This was expected. The Corthians always went for titanium, believing their 4 arms gave them advantage in working the material. The Grolnecks preferred carbon composites, something about the crystalline structure appealing to their aesthetic sense. The Veltraxians, bless their methodical hearts, always chose ceramics and spent the entire 5 days calculating stress factors. Maya didn't move. She just stood there, arms crossed, watching everyone else scramble for materials. I figured maybe she was intimidated. Humans were new to the academy, after all, only been part of the coalition for 6 years. Perhaps the reality of competing against species with natural advantages was sinking in. I approached her workstation after the initial chaos died down. Cadet Kowalski, I said, keeping my voice neutral. The materials won't select themselves. She looked up at me, and I swear there was something like amusement in those eyes. Permission to use alternative materials. Instructor Vektar. I blinked. All 3 of my eyes. The assignment is to forge a blade using the provided materials. Those are the parameters. Right, she said slowly. But the assignment says forge a blade. Doesn't technically specify I have to use those exact materials, does it? Oh, this one thought she was clever. I'd had smart talkers before. Usually they crashed and burned spectacularly, then learned humility. Very well, I said, allowing my mandibles to click in what she'd hopefully interpret as irritation. Use whatever materials you wish. The testing standards remain the same. Understood, sir. She left, just walked right out of the forge. The other cadets noticed. Whispers spread. The human was giving up already. Couldn't handle the pressure. Some of the Corthian students made clicking sounds that passed for laughter in their species. Even I wondered if I'd been too harsh. If the human psychological profile reports about their emotional fragility were accurate. She came back 4 hours later, carrying a bag. I was helping a Veltraxian student calculate the proper forge temperature for their ceramic blend when I noticed Maya at her station, emptying the contents of her bag. My curiosity got the better of me. I wandered over. What I saw made no sense. Bones. She had a collection of bones. Cadet, I said carefully. What are those? Bones, sir. She said it like it was the most obvious thing in the universe. From the station's protein recycling center. These are from the latest shipment of Talraxian cattle. Got permission from the dietary management supervisor. I felt my breathing spiracles flutter. You're going to forge a blade from bones? Yes, sir. Bones. Yes, sir. Organic material that will char at high temperatures, crack under stress, and shatter under any significant impact force. She smiled. Actually smiled. Not if I do it right. The next 4 days were the most bizarre teaching experience of my career. While other students worked their materials in the forge, heating and hammering and tempering using techniques refined over centuries, Maya did something else entirely. She sorted through her bone collection, selecting pieces with care I couldn't fathom. She used measuring tools to check density. She tapped them, listening to the sound like some kind of primitive diviner. Then she started the real madness. She built a small enclosed chamber using scrap materials from the recycling bay, created an oxygen-poor environment inside, placed selected bones in there, and heated them. Not forge temperatures, something lower, more controlled. She was charring them deliberately, watching the color change from white to tan to brown to black. "Cadet, what is that smell?" a Grolneck student complained. "Carbonization," Maya replied cheerfully. "I'm turning the organic compounds into carbon structure." I watched despite myself, watched her char the bones until they were black as deep space, watched her cool them slowly, temperature controlled with obsessive precision, then watched her take the blackened bones to a grinding station. She worked for hours, grinding, shaping, testing the edge against standard materials. The sound was horrific, this screech of organic carbon against metal grinding wheels. Other students complained. I almost stopped her, but I didn't, because despite every logical reason this shouldn't work, despite 47 years of teaching proper metallurgy, I wanted to see where this insanity led. On the 5th day, testing day, Maya appeared with her creation. It was black, roughly 8 inches long, curved slightly, with an edge that caught the light in ways that made my blood run cold. It looked primitive, ancient, wrong. The other students presented their blades with pride. Gleaming titanium alloys, perfectly structured carbon composites, mathematically precise ceramics, professional work, proper work. Then came Maya's turn. "This is your submission?" I asked, examining the bone blade. It was lighter than expected, smooth where she'd polished it, textured where she'd left the original bone structure visible. "Yes, sir." The standard tests began. First, edge retention. We used synthetic flesh analog, roughly similar to most organic species. Standard blades made clean cuts, as expected. Maya's blade sliced through like the analog wasn't even there. Second, flexibility test. Measured stress before fracture point. The bone blade flexed, more than it should, more than made sense. Third, combat durability. Impact testing against hardened plates. This was where organic materials always failed. Always. The blade would shatter, and the student would learn an important lesson about material selection. I brought the hammer down on Maya's blade with standard force. The ringing sound it made was wrong. Not the crack of fracturing material, not the dull thud of absorption. A clear, almost musical tone. The blade had a small nick, that's all. I hit it again. Harder. Another small nick. The Corthian students stopped laughing. The Grolnecks whispered among themselves. The Veltraxians recalculated everything they thought they knew about material science. Maya just stood there with that small smile, like she'd known all along. "How?" I finally asked. 47 years of teaching, and I was asking a first-year cadet how. She held up the blade, examining it in the light. "Humans have been making tools from bones for thousands of years, way before we had metallurgy. The trick is understanding the organic structure. Bone has natural composite properties, collagen and mineral matrix. When you char it properly, you're not destroying that structure. You're transforming it, creating something with the hardness of ceramic and the flexibility of polymer, but with a crystalline carbon edge that shouldn't work," I interrupted. Her smile widened. "Yeah, shouldn't, but does." And that's when I realized something that the rest of the galaxy was just beginning to understand about humans. They don't care what should work. They only care what does work. The testing hall went absolutely silent. You have to understand, silence in a room full of cadets from 40 different species is not normal. There's always some kind of noise. Corthians clicking their mandibles, Grolnecks humming in their low-frequency range, Veltraxians tapping calculations on their data pads. Something. But right then, nothing. Everyone was staring at the bone blade that had just survived impact testing that should have shattered it into dust. I looked at Maya. She looked back at me with those green eyes, still wearing that tiny smile that suggested she knew a joke the rest of us hadn't figured out yet. "Cadet Kowalski," I said, keeping my voice level, "explain the complete process." "Right now, sir?" "Right now," she shrugged, holding up the black blade. "Okay, so first thing you need to know is that bone isn't just one material. It's a composite. You've got collagen fibers and hydroxyapatite crystals arranged in this really specific structure. Nature spent millions of years figuring out how to make something lightweight but strong. A Veltraxian student raised one of their appendages, but organic materials decompose. They lack structural integrity under stress. Fresh bone, sure, Maya agreed. But I didn't use fresh bone. I used a charring process called carbonization. Low oxygen environment, controlled heat around 700 degrees Celsius. What happens is the organic compounds break down and reorganize into a carbon structure while maintaining the original geometric pattern of the bone. I felt my teaching instincts kick in despite my confusion. That should make it brittle. Should, yeah. That's why the cooling process matters. Too fast and you get microfractures. Too slow, and the carbon structure doesn't set properly. I cooled it over 18 hours, temperature dropping 1 degree every 12 minutes. She was rattling off numbers like she'd done this 1,000 times. Then came the shaping. I used grinding wheels at low speed to avoid generating heat that would change the carbon structure. The edge got special attention. Progressive grinding from rough to fine, creating a tapered profile that distributes stress across a wider area. A Grulnex cadet, one of the bigger ones named Thorgrim, stomped forward. His species didn't like being shown up. "This is ridiculous. Primitive materials used by primitive species. Let me test this properly." He grabbed the bone blade before I could stop him. Maya didn't even flinch, just watched. Thorgrim held the blade in one massive hand, a titanium alloy demonstration bar in the other. The bar was standard equipment, used to show students proper blade resilience. He placed the bone blade against it. "Let's see how your garbage holds up against real materials." He pulled the bone blade across the titanium bar. The sound was like fingernails on a chalkboard, but worse. Higher pitched. The kind of sound that makes your organs vibrate uncomfortably. When he lifted the blade away, there was a visible score mark on the titanium bar. The bone blade. Not even scratched. Thorgrim's expression went through several phases. Confusion, disbelief, then something that looked suspiciously like fear. That's not possible." Maya took her blade back gently. "You're thinking about it wrong. You're all thinking about it wrong. You see bone and you think weak, because it's organic. But humans, we learned a long time ago that nature builds things pretty efficiently. We just had to figure out how to work with it instead of against it. But the material science doesn't support this," a Veltraxian insisted, already running calculations on their datapad. "The carbon structure you describe should have a failure threshold well below what we just witnessed." "Should, yeah," Maya said again, and I was starting to realize that word was her favorite. But here's the thing about human engineering. We don't always start with the theory. Sometimes we start with what works, and then figure out the theory later. I had to sit down. 47 years. 47 years of teaching proper metallurgical theory, material science, structural engineering, all of it based on understanding the theory first, then applying it. And this human just casually mentioned her species does it backward. "How long have humans been doing this?" I asked. Maya thought about it. "Making tools from bone? Archaeological evidence suggests at least 2 million years. Using fire to harden materials? Maybe 400,000 years. Controlled carbonization for toolmaking? Hard to say exactly. But we found evidence going back at least 50,000 years. 2 million years. Her species had been engineering tools for 2 million years before they even developed agriculture. Before cities. Before written language. They'd been figuring out material properties through pure trial and error for longer than most coalition species had records of their own existence. Tell me something, cadet, I said slowly. When you first saw this assignment, what was your thought process? She looked almost embarrassed. Honestly, I thought about my great-grandmother. Your, what? My great-grandmother. She lived in a place on Earth called rural Montana, very isolated. When things broke, you couldn't just order new parts. You fixed them with whatever you had. She once repaired a farming machine using parts from an old washing unit, some wire from a fence, and I'm not kidding about this, a carved piece of wood from a tree. The other cadets were listening now, completely absorbed. She taught me that expensive materials don't mean better results. Smart application of available resources means better results. So when you said forge a blade, everyone else heard use the best materials available. I heard solve the problem with whatever works. Thorgrim, who'd been silent since the titanium bar incident, spoke up. But why bone? Why not at least use metal if you were going to deviate from the provided materials? Maya's smile turned into a full grin. Because I wanted to see if I could, and because there's something you all need to understand about humans. She held up the black blade, letting it catch the light. We don't just make tools, we make statements. This blade? It's a statement that says your fancy alloys and composites and ceramics are great, sure, but never underestimate what someone can do with materials you'd throw away. Never assume that primitive means ineffective. And never ever think that just because something's been done the same way for a long time, it's the only way to do it. The testing hall erupted, not in anger but in excited conversation. Students clustering around Maya, asking questions about the process. Veltraxians demanding precise temperature measurements. Corthians wanting to examine the blade's structure under magnification. Even Thorgrim looked intrigued, rather than insulted now. I watched it all happen, feeling something I hadn't felt in decades of teaching. I felt like a student again. Later, after the other cadets had left, Maya approached my desk. She looked uncertain for the first time since I'd met her. Sir, I hope I didn't overstep. I know the assignment was supposed to teach us about proper material selection and forge technique. I looked at the bone blade, still sitting on my desk where she'd left it for final grading. Cadet Kowalski, do you know what the actual purpose of that assignment is? To teach metallurgy fundamentals? No. I picked up the blade, feeling its weight, its balance. It's to teach cadets that there are rules in combat engineering. Rules about material properties, stress tolerances, failure thresholds, rules that keep you alive. I handed the blade back to her. You just taught me that sometimes the most important rule is knowing when to break all the others. Grade, perfect, marks. Now get out of my classroom before I have to completely rewrite my curriculum. She took the blade, grinning. Thank you, sir. As she walked toward the door, I called out, Cadet. Yes, sir? Next assignment is armor design. Please tell me you're not going to show up with turtle shells or something equally insane. Her laugh echoed through the hall. No promises, sir. And that's how I learned that teaching humans isn't about showing them the right way to do things. It's about surviving the experience when they show you 17 ways you never considered, half of which shouldn't work but somehow do anyway. 3 cycles later, I still have that bone blade. Keep it in my office. When students ask about it, I tell them the story. Some think it's inspiring, others think it's terrifying. Me? I think it's both. Because if humans can make a combat-grade blade from garbage that everyone else throws away, what else can they do with materials we've dismissed? With techniques we've forgotten? With ideas we've never even considered? The galaxy's been doing things a certain way for thousands of years. Refined techniques, perfected processes, built on solid theory and proven practice. Then humans show up with their bone knives and their backward engineering, and their great-grandmother's wisdom about fixing farming machines with washing unit parts. And suddenly everything we thought we knew seems a lot less certain. That's not a comforting thought when you've spent 47 years being certain. But you know what? It's definitely not boring.